Howdy everybody, Steve here, KM9G. Today is another glorious day to play FT8 on ham radio. I'm going to take the Icom IC-703, which is a 5 or 10 watt QRP radio made by Icom way back in the day. It is a fantastic radio. It doesn't have a whole lot of settings, but there are a couple of gotchas, and I'm going to walk you through all of those things in this video. If you don't have an Icom 703, I have a playlist up above of all kinds of radios that I have shown people how to configure on FT8. Even if you don't have one of the radios in that list, there will still be lots of useful information in this video about how to work FT8, what FT8 does, what's the best way to get the most amount of usage out of FT8, and all kinds of things like that. There are also chapter markers down below the video. If you go down to the timeline, it'll tell you all the different things that you would find in this video, such as the configuration tab in WSJT-X if you want to zoom straight into that. But if you want to know how to best configure the radio, or how to plug a Digirig into the back of the radio, what cable goes into what port and why, then stick around and we'll go through all of those things in this video. Another thing that I've got for you is that I am going to be running this on a Raspberry Pi, which runs the Linux operating system. There are not hardly any differences between running this on a Raspberry Pi or running this on Mac OS or running this on Windows. And where there are, I will point them out and I will get you headed in the right direction to make sure that it works for you. So if you are Linux averse or a Raspberry Pi hater, I still got you covered. We're still going to get to the end of this and you're still going to know how to FT8 with the Icom 703. But first things first, we've got to get some soldering done. Let's get over to the workbench and get it all sorted out. All right. We are going to use, I don't know why I care about how neat this looks for the 5 seconds I'm going to show it to you, but we are going to use a Digirig mobile for the Icom 703 setup. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting. You get the Digirig off of Amazon and it is ready to be configured. We'll show you that in just a second. You also get a USB A to C cable, or you can get a coiled up nice USB C to A cable like this one, or you can use your own USB cable because it's just a regular USB cable. The neat part about the ones that Dennis from Digirig offers is that they have the built-in ferrites to help with the choking. In addition, you're going to need the CIV cable. It's actually CI5, I know. We just call it CIV because we're not Icom and we like to use CIV instead of CI5. Anyway, you need the CIV cable, which is green on one end and it's got this 90-degree hook on the other end, and this will get you CAT control, as it's called in the rest of the world, but again, Icom calls it CI5. And then you need this cable here, which plugs into the Digirig on one end and has this 13-pin massive monster cable on the other side. And this gets you your audio data over to the rig and back over to the computer for decoding stuff. We need to do a little modification on the Digirig itself. So I'm going to get out my screwdriver set and get out my Phillips head screwdriver, and we're going to remove the Digirig from the case. And that was fairly easy getting that out of the case. On the back side of the Digirig, you will see, focus, you'll see that there is a bunch of pads here for configuration and a bunch of pads up here for configuration. And what we need to do is we need to cut the traces on the bottom corner, and then we need to make an L-shaped configuration to change it over to half duplex for CIV work. And you don't need to do this for other radios, but you do need to do this for an Icom. And the Digirig is really cool because you can use it with a lot of radios. Once you get this configured for Icom, it's going to not work with other radios, but then you can come back in here and you can put this back to normal for other radios that are not Icom. Configure this, put it in your go bag for your Icom radios, and then you've got one ready to roll. And if you decide to sell all your Icom radios and want to keep this to use with the rest of your radios, you can put it back. So let's get to work. I need my solder kit. And I need some solder. This is Kester. This is the best stuff on earth. It is leaded solder, so breathe deeply when you're soldering so that you can get the most enjoyment and excitement out of it. That's a joke. Don't breathe deeply. On the bottom of the Digirig, we need to cut 2 traces, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4, these lower corners near the word CMOS. And I guess before we do that, let's prove that it's not already disconnected. So when we prove that it is disconnected, you don't have to take my word for it. And the way that we do that is with a regular multimeter in continuity beep mode. So there's a beep there, those are connected. And there's a beep there, those are connected. So now I'm going to take my pocket knife, or your X-Acto knife, or your razor blade, or your Stanley knife, or whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to cut between those traces until I sever the connection. Now let's see if that was enough. There's not really a whole lot there to cut, so that should be enough. Hey, we got it. All right, no continuity between those 4 pads. And now we need to make an L-shaped connection. All right, warm enough. And we want to go from the center pin to the outer pin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little solder blob there, and then another solder blob there, and then a third solder blob there, and then I'll connect the 3 solder blobs together. And because of the magic of solder masks and surface tension and so on, this is actually going to be a little bit more tricky than you might think, because it's specifically designed to not do this thing. Okay, there we go. And now we will check to make sure that we have the right continuity and don't have the wrong continuity. All right. Test the meter mode, good. No continuity between middle and bottom left. Correct. No continuity between middle and bottom middle. Correct. And then we have continuity between middle and middle right. Correct. And then middle right and bottom right. Correct. And then bottom right and middle. Correct. And then Dennis says that this lower left pin will have continuity with this, and that's perfectly okay. So now we are configured properly, and you can see my nasty solder work there. But that's okay. That's going to get the job done. Let's get it all put back together and plug it into the radio. There is a completely different technique if you have a 1.5 version. This is the one that you'll find 1.9 of the Digirig on the Jungle Market. That's all done. Now we get to do physical connections. How does this Digirig connect up to your radio? Let's go over hardware. I'm going to be using a Raspberry Pi 5. You can use whatever computer you want, Windows or Linux or Macintosh or whatever, and we'll go over all of the settings. This is just really easy to show because of how small it is. This is the Argon Neo 5B Red case. So it's got plastic on the bottom to let your Wi-Fi's out. It has a fan built into it and a heat sink to get the heat out. And it is metal on top, so it's got some durability to it. Get yourself a good SD card because this is going to have all of your FT8 logs stored on it. With the B-Red case, there is a door that goes over top of this and screws into place. So if you are going to use this as a field computer, then your SD card's not going to fall out and get lost or get dirty or whatever the case may be. That takes care of the computer side of things. We need to hook up the Digirig. And the Digirig comes with that USB cable that I showed you. This is just audio and serial data, and on the back you have high speed in blue and regular speed in black. So go ahead and use the black one because we're not using a whole lot of speed in this case. And then you have your Digirig. So your USB plug plugs into the side marked USB. It only has one choice there, but you do get choices on the other side. I have one of these Digirigs that is black and black, and this one here that is black and green. So it's a good thing that it's also written on it that it's audio and serial. So let's take a look at the serial cable. It has a green connector on one side and it has a tip ring sleeve connector on the other side. This is your CIV or CI5, and then this is the serial cable that plugs into this side. Match it color for color, or match it serial for serial, and you're good to go. And then you have that 13-pin data cable with another TRS plug on the side. We need audio in, audio out, and I think the other ones are ground and possibly PTT, which can be connected through this as well. So we're going to plug this into the audio hole on this side. And that takes care of the next part in the chain. So computer, Digirig, cables, and now the radio. And on the, where is it? On the back of the radio, there is a little diagram legend as to what all of these ports are. You could get a 6-pin data cable, but I have the 13-pin data cable for this. It works just fine either way. Plug your antenna into the only antenna socket, plug your 13-pin audio cable into the only hole that it fits into, and it is keyed at the top of the connector and notched at the top of the cable, so it only goes in one way. And then this is where you have a choice to make. And you have to make the right choice. But there are two 3.5 millimeter audio jacks here, and you need to go into the one on the right-hand side as you're looking at the back of the radio. And if you look down here, the one on the left is for your external speaker, and the one on the right is for a remote. And the remote is the one that you want for your CI5 cable or CIV cable. and then you're done. We've got it all soldered in. We've got it all physically connected. Now we need to do some hardware configuration inside of the radio, and then we'll get on to software. Okay, to make sure there are no tricks up my sleeve, I'm going to do a factory reset by pushing the up button, the down button for bands, and then pushing the power key. And it wants to know if it should clear all, and I'm going to say OK. And it wants me to push it for 1 second, so I have to long press that button. It reboots itself, clearing all of its factory settings and coming back to life. Now we need to turn it off again, and this time we want to hold down the lock button and turn it on, which is going to get us into the internal menu. Number 1 is max power set. I am not 100% sure whether this radio can handle heat or not handle heat very well, so I'm going to turn this down to 5. You can do what you want to do with this, but I'm going to do it at 5. That's going to limit the power output of the radio to 5 watts max, no matter what. And then this little knob over here, the multi-knob on the lower left, we turn that. Option number 36 is 9600 mode or 1200 mode. You want this set to 1200 mode, or else the audio won't go from the back of the radio into the computer properly. The cable is wired for 1200 baud audio, not for 9600 baud audio. The CIV baud, option number 41, needs to be set to something that you know what it is. I set mine to 9600. Pick a speed, just make sure that this speed setting matches the speed setting later on in WSJT-X. I'm going to use 9600 later on in the video to match up with this speed here. This option here, number 43, CI-731, should be set to off. This is if you're connecting this radio to a 735 transceiver. It's not something that we're going to use, and if we were connecting to it, it would use the cable port that we're using for this. So we need to make sure this is set off. It changes the way that the CIV speaks, and we need to speak non-this. So set option 43 to off. And then we're right back to the beginning. And in order to save these, you just turn the radio off, and it's been saved, and then you turn it back on, and you're good to go. With the radio up and running, there are a couple of settings on the front panel. You have your menus down here, split AB, XFC, we're not going to use that. M2, we're not going to use any of M2. M3, you have a filter. If you have a filter installed, you want to make sure, I do not have a filter installed, so I can't show you, but you want to make sure that filter is either 3000 hertz wide or is completely disabled. If you have some ignition noise, then having the noise blanker on might help you. That's from your car's alternator, and you hear this ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk in your band. It is best if you just leave it off unless you have that problem, and it might help. Try it either way if you do have that problem. For a meter, we're going to want to hit this a couple of times until we see ALC show up over here. We'll need the ALC meter later on in the video. And it's just a cycle. So ALC, power, SWR, and then back to ALC. Leave it at ALC. Next up we have Voxcom and AGC. For AGC you have fast AGC or no AGC. And we want no AGC. What AGC does is it takes a very loud burst of sound and quiets it down. And we don't want to quiet anything down. We want all of the signal to go into the radio, and then we want to control it later on. And I'll show you how to do that as we get farther into the video. That's all for the M menus. If you long press display, you get a Q1 menu. And this is the other way to set RF power. The first way that I showed you was in the deep menus, in the power on, holding down the lock key and the power button. But this one here is a different way to show it. So I have it currently set to 5 in the deep menu. And so this scale goes from L to H, so from 0, L, all the way up to maximum power, H, which would be 10, and that H is limited by 5. So this is actually a half scale. So this is 5 watts, and then that's 4.5, and then that's 4, and so on down the line. If the deep menu was set to 10 watts max, then this would be 10 watts, 9 watts, 8 watts, 7 watts, 6 watts, etc. So leaving this at high and having the other one set to 5 works, or setting this one here down to 5 works, or learning how to manage the heat of your radio also works. Either one of those is good by me. That's Q1 RF power. I'm going to put that back to high, and then it's limited by my deep menu to 5. Q2 is mic gain. We're not using a microphone, don't need that. Carrier frequency, we don't need to worry about that. Leave that at 0. Over on the left-hand side, you have your preamp or your attenuator, and you don't want any of those on. You want this button to show up in an orange color instead of in a red color. Red means engaged, orange means off. For this, green means preamp, orange means off, and long press for attenuate, and you have it to red. We want this to be orange or dim. And then we're good to go with radio settings. There's not a lot of settings in this radio. I like it. I'll leave links down in the description below for everything that I showed you in this video to make you a hero on FT8. Let's get over to the screen share and start going through the configuration on the computer and installing software and all kinds of jazz like that. I'm going to leave links down in the description for all of these websites that I'm showing you. The first one I want to show you is where to get the WSJT-X software from, and that is wsjt.sourceforge.io. And when you get there and you go right to the homepage, you're going to see this screen because there is more to WSJT than just FT8. But we want the WSJT-X program, and that program is good for That program is good for a lot of modes. FST4, FST4W, FT4, FT8, JT4, JT9, JT65, Q65, MSK144, Whisper, and more to come. The latest release is 2.7, so we're going to first install the older release to get all the dependencies sorted out in a nice, easy way, and then we're going to install 2.7. If you are running Windows, there is an installation package. Windows 7 or later is required, and if you're watching this video, it was created in 2025. The chances of you having a 32-bit computer are nearly impossible. You probably have a 64-bit computer. Get the 64-bit version, but if you do have the 32-bit computer, you already know you have one and you already know what you're doing, so why are you here anyway? Anyway, get the 64-bit version for Windows. When you download the installer, it is fairly straightforward to run it. It might tell you this program is not signed by Microsoft. It's okay. I don't know if it will tell you that or not, but if it does, take a deep breath, click the More Info button, click the Install Anyway button, and let her rip. What that is if it is, Microsoft has not seen this application, they have not approved of this application, they didn't sign off on this application, and the WSJT developers and the rest of the community didn't pay the extortion fee to Microsoft. It's no big deal. This software has been installed and run by millions of hams all over the planet, and no one has complained, so you are in good company by clicking the Run Anyway button. Under Linux, you can get it for Ubuntu, for Fedora, for Raspberry Pi OS Bullseye running ARM v6, or Raspberry Pi OS Bookworm running ARM64. If you are running macOS, there's a couple of special things that you need to do. Not really a big deal, just some stuff that you need to do. And it is all taken care of inside of the README file, inside of the disk image that you download. Download the disk image, read the README file. There is some stuff about shared memory config in there. WSJT-X needs more shared memory config than what the operating system comes configured with by default. They give you the commands to run it. It's a one-time run. That'll take care of it. There's another setting in there about audio setup, and it walks you through getting that set up as well. It'll work without changing that setting, but you probably should change it so you get the most amount of usability out of WSJT-X. And then if you are very brave, you can read the source code, or you can, whoa, I clicked too many buttons, and now I'm downloading source code. I'm not that brave yet. Back to what I was saying. Or if you are really brave, you can download the source code and the necessary resources to compile it, and you can read the source code and learn all about how it was programmed, and then you can build it for a system that it wasn't already pre-built for you. So there are a lot of ways to get after this. Like I said, though, I am going to use my package manager on Raspberry Pi, which my package manager I happen to like is called Nala. So I'm going to do sudo Nala install WSJT-X, and it's going to look it up in the package repository. It's going to find a whole bunch of dependencies. Fonts awesome, fonts open sans, ham radio files, ham lib, which is going to be really important for controlling your radio, libqt5, which is going to be important for all of your on-screen presentation, the WSJT-X program itself, the data, and the documentation. And this is the 2.6.1 version. It will work just fine if you don't want to go any farther than that, or you can go farther and do the 2.7 install. I'm going to say, yes, I want to continue. And this is where Nala really shines. It's going to do the downloads, and once it gets enough stuff downloaded, it's also going to start installing packages behind the scenes. And it is multi-threaded, so it runs a lot faster. And as a result of that, it's done. And then from there, we can close down the terminal and never look back. Let's go in and run our software program. On Raspberry Pi, you're going to find it, oddly enough, under Sound and Video, and that's fine. You can move it around if you so desire, but it's under the Raspberry Pi menu, it's under Sound and Video, and it is WSJT-X. Let me minimize Firefox and get that out of the way, because one of the first things that happens when you first run it is it pops up a little notification box that tells you all about the program, and it just disappeared. You can tell it never to show it again, or you can have it pop up every single time you run it. And I'm trying to get it to the point where I can see it, so I can click the Don't Show Me This button again button, which is right here. Don't show me this again. And I click don't show me this again, and it disappears. So now, if I exit and go back in, I won't see that again, and it's not there. If I ever do want to see it again, help about WSJT-X gives me all of that info that was in that box anyway. When you first run the software, it is not configured for your radio or for you or your station, so we've got to go in and get that taken care of. On the Windows version or the Linux version, you go to the File menu and you choose Settings. On the Mac OS version, you click on the menu up in the corner where it says WSJT-X, and then you find the settings under that menu option. And then that's one of the few differences that there are. What you want to do is go through every one of these tabs at the top. I'll show you the important ones. The rest of them are kind of up to you to play with. And fill out everything that you can think of to fill out. So first I'm going to put in my call sign, KM9G, and then it wants my grid square. And if you hover over any single one of these options, most of these options, almost all of them that I have seen, it'll give you what's called a tooltip, and that is this little gray thing here that says Maidenhead locator, preferably 6 characters, which is why I'm going to give it 6 characters. But if you hover over any one of these other things, it'll give you a description of the other thing. As we're going through this, I'll tell you what I do, and then you can go through and you can pick any one of these other features and see how you like it, see how you don't like it, turn it on, turn it off. Ham radio is all about experimentation, so click them and have fun with them and see what they do. Grid square. Go back to my web browser. I'm going to pick my grid square tool. This is Levine Central, and I need to enter in any address, city, state, or zip. And currently, where am I? I don't know where I am. I'm in Guyman, Oklahoma. I move around the country all the time, so not knowing where I am physically actually happens quite a lot. I type in Guyman, Oklahoma, and I hit submit. It looks it up, and it tells me DM96GQ. So I am going to copy that, but let's take a look on the map and see what Guyman, Oklahoma looks like. Google Maps can't load correctly. That's fine. I don't care. I don't own the site, and I'm not able to fix it, even if it could. But there we go, for development purposes only, and you can see that I am in what appears to be Guyman, Oklahoma. Yep, that works for me. That looks like the area that I'm in. So I'm going to take that number, that DM96GQ that we found, and I'm going to go back to my configuration dialog box, and I'm going to paste it in there, DM96GQ. Now WSJT-X knows where I am, and when I send out my call, it will tell you where I am, and then you can find out grid square wise how far apart we are. One of the things you can do with the FT8 is you can work all grids, and there's a program specifically designed to help you work all grids. But if I don't tell you my grid square, which is my location, then you're not going to know what your location is. Typical amateur radio QSOs or conversations are made up of a couple of things: your call sign, your signal report, and your location. So WSJT-X takes care of all of those things for you behind the scenes. As far as options go, I don't like to start new period decodes at the top. I like it to run from, like a typical scrolling screen, but you can have it go the other way where it scrolls down the page instead of scrolls up the page. That's up to you. I do it my way, you do it your way. Blank line between decoding periods. I do like this. It actually puts a line and then it tells you the band that you're on in the screen over here behind this page. I don't have any decodes yet because I haven't configured my radio yet, but when I do, you'll see that pop up. I'm in the United States. I use miles. Leave me a nasty comment down below if you don't like using miles. We can have that freedom units argument anytime. I don't care. Neither do most people. Transmit messages to RX frequency window. That is over here. And so whenever I transmit, it will put my transmission messages over there. So I can kind of follow along in the conversation and I can see the breaks. And if I run this program for a long time, I find that very useful. Show DXCC grid and worked before status. This is only going to be this computer's WSJT-X log. If you have worked somebody before outside of a WSJT digital mode, then they won't show up unless you go through the trouble of matching up your logs, and that's really complex. However, it will tell me that I have worked somebody in FT8 before in this program, so I like to turn that on, and it gives them a different color and all kinds of other fun stuff. This one here, I like double click on call sets TX enable. If I find somebody over here on the left side, a good friend of mine I want to talk to, bam, double click, start talking to them right away. Calling CQ forces call first is actually a really good option. There is a setting over here, and we'll get into that. But if I call CQ, if I have it on transmit 6, and it's got my call sign in it, which it will after we finish this box, and I hit enable TX, and I call CQ, and this is set to CQ none, I'm just calling CQ, and whether anybody answers me or not, I'm not responding to them. So at the very least, force it to call first or make this decision. And I'll show you those decisions when we get a little farther down there. The alternate key bindings, you can do that. And again, you can experiment with any one of these things. We're fairly well done with the general tab. We're going to move over to the radio tab. Inside of the radio tab, this is for the Icom 703, but there are hundreds of rigs in here. It is sorted alphabetically, not numerically, so you're going to see some weird number things like 100 and 1000 show up before. I'm making an example. Here's a good one. Like 7000 shows up earlier than 703, even though 7000 is greater than 703. We're using the 703. Pick the 703. Dev TTY USB 0 is the serial port for communication on Linux. On Mac, it's going to be a CU dot number. You will only see the number when the radio is plugged in, and when you unplug it, it will disappear. WSJT-X doesn't like to have the world changed out from underneath of it after it's already running, but you would exit the program and come back in and check this again. It's going to be CU dot something on Mac OS, and there's only going to be one or two choices. It's easier just to pick the CU dot something and go for it. And if it doesn't work, pick the other CU dot something if you have more than one. You probably don't have more than one. And if you do, you're pretty advanced and completely understand what I just said. On Windows, it's going to be COM1, COM2, COM3, COM4, something along those lines. And if you hover over it, this says Silicon Labs, something, 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 CP2102. That is the serial port chip inside of the Digirig. So if you hover over it, it should say Silicon Labs CP2102. That's the one that you want. So pick that port. COM1, COM2 something, CU dot something, or in my case, TTY USB 0. Fairly easy to narrow it down to what the actual thing is. I'm going to pick TTY USB 0. Inside of your radio, you have to configure the serial port parameters. I've already showed you how to do that in this video, and then you make that number match. This is serial port communications, and it's only sending back and forth your frequency and mode and so on commands. It's not used very often. Speed doesn't terribly matter. I picked 9600 for lack of any better number. There are other numbers to choose. 9600 works just fine. Leave the whole rest of this side alone. Default, 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 and blank for force control lines works just fine. Next up, we're going to need a push-to-talk method. The Digirig uses the RTS push-to-talk method, so I pick RTS, and it wants to know a port. I'm going to use the same port for the Digirig, TTY USB 0, and again, I get that same tooltip telling me it's the right port to use. Down here on the bottom, you can pick data packet. The 703 does a weird data packet setting, and I have tested it as just USB or as data packet, and it doesn't actually make any difference. It doesn't accept input from the microphone unless you PTT the mic, so you're not going to have like ambient audio from your shack going out over the airwaves if you pick USB over picking data packet, and it works either way. I'm going to pick data packet because I'm a little pedantic like that and like to have it set up properly, and this will have WSJT-X tell the radio to do data packet mode, which tells the radio to send all of its audio out of the rear port and accept audio in from the rear port. But the 703 doesn't care. It's fine. Under split operation, usually I would say to do this as rig, but in this case, I will say to do it as fake it. So first off, what happens when you change the split operation from none to rig to fake it? Your radio's passband is 3 kilohertz wide in single sideband mode. And if I'm running the upper side of the passband, if I'm at 2.4 or something in the passband, when I go to transmit, I'm going to transmit at 2.4. My radio is not designed to transmit the side of the frequency as efficiently as it's designed to transmit the middle of the frequency. And so when you have WSJT-X set for split operation and you have it set to rig, it's going to use your VFO-A, VFO-B split setting inside of the radio. And when you transmit, it's going to switch to VFO-B, which is going to be on a different frequency, and then it is going to transmit. And when it switches over, it's going to move to the center of the passband, transmit, and then it's going to switch back. And by doing that, it moves your ears on your radio to the best spot to listen to all of the FT8 signals coming in, or it moves your mouth on your radio to the best spot to transmit so that you have the best chance of being heard by the other side. In the case of the 703, when you do that and you use the 703's built-in tuner, it switches over to VFO-B and then tunes. And if you haven't gotten far enough along in your cycles yet with everything, like you've turned the radio on, you've loaded the software's made its configuration choices, and then you hit the tune button, your VFO-B frequency hasn't been properly set yet, and it tunes on whatever random frequency VFO-B was on way back in the past the last time you used VFO-B. So that's the only reason why with the 703 I would use any other mode then rig. And if you're using a radio that when you try rig, it doesn't actually work, then use fake it. And if that doesn't actually work, then use none. In the case of the 703, when I use fake it, what it's going to do is send a CAT control command to change the frequency on VFO-A, transmit, send another CAT control command on VFO-A to put it back to the center for listening, and then listen. It's a whole lot of stuff to say use fake it for the 703. Now we all know a little bit more. Let's get back over to configuration. Okay, so that is everything on this page. If you press test CAT now, you're going to get a problem. I'll show you. It says I haven't configured the audio input. I don't need an audio input to test CAT. It's kind of a bug in my mind, and it's been around for a while. So we're going to get rid of the invalid audio input device message by giving it an audio input device. And in the case of the Digirig, it is the C Media Electronics CM108 sound card. That's the chip that's inside of the device. So I'm going to pick that for input. And wouldn't you know it, I need an output too, and I'm going to use the same one. And in this case here, I have more audio output devices than can fit on an entire screen. So I need to take my box and move it up as high as I can get it. And then when I pick output, it's going to be just barely the last device on the screen. So I pick it. And now I have the input and the audio defined, and I can go back to the radio tab, and now I can hit test CAT. And you'll hear your radio change. The radio went in and did its auto-tune sequence. I'm on the right frequency for 10 meter FT8, which is where the radio happened to be. WSJT-X saw that it was already on 10 meter FT8 from my last part of learning how to do this to share it with y'all. The test PTT was a little weird. During my testing, this did not show up. If you've got another radio config, another Digirig, or whatever the case may be, this might not come into play. It doesn't terribly matter, but I'm going to press test PTT right now. And I can see that my radio went into transmit mode, so my test PTT works as well. During my testing, like I was saying, something I did messed all this stuff up. In order to get this thing running for you guys for this demo, I wiped out the operating system, reloaded it fresh from scratch, and now I can test PTT and it works fine. If it doesn't work, it's okay. For me, the test PTT button was grayed out, and so was the choice for the port, but I had selected RTS, which was still selectable. It was on TTY USB for CAT control. PTT worked even though the button was gray. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes when you do test CAT, the light doesn't turn green. The button should turn green if it works properly. It did work properly. It didn't turn green. It's another bug in the software, but it's free software. It's fantastic software. We have a lot of fun with it. I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out some gotchas that you might see that might give you pause to stop. Don't stop. Keep on going. All right, so that was the radio tab. That was the audio tab. The rest of the settings on the audio tab don't matter. Transmit macros, you can look at that if you'd like to add some. I don't use those things. The reporting tab is really important to me, though. So I'm going to look at the reporting tab. I like it to say prompt me to log QSO when it is done making a QSO. It gives me the opportunity to make some notes, and I will show you that when it comes up. Also, it's kind of cool. Like, hey, you made a contact. Here's all the details. I don't want it just to roll by automatically without me being a part of the situation. So I do prompt me to log QSO. The rest of the stuff I leave alone. The operator call, this is if you are running as a club call or something, and you can put in your station call sign in the general tab as one thing and the operator call in the operator section as another thing. So under general, I did KM9G. Under here, I can do Decodes, KT0ADS, which is my club call. Down here, I want to do PSK reporter spotting. Enable PSK reporter spotting, use TCP IP connection. I can get out into the weeds as to why this matters. TCP gives you a confirmation that your report was received, and not using this would mean that you're going to use a UDP connection. Stop that. And not using this would mean that you're going to use a UDP connection, and the UDP connection is just fire and forget. It's going to send the message to PSK Reporter's website, and I don't care if I get an answer back or not. I kind of care, so I check it. Leave this stuff here the same. There's nothing to worry about here. Down here under secondary UDP server, it's deprecated. I hope they don't get rid of it. Deprecated means that it's going to disappear sometime in the future. I really hope that they don't, because we play a couple of online games with live interactive scoreboards. The current one that we play is called FT8 Poker over at frequencyfrenzy.live, and I want to enable the broadcast for that. And what this will do is it will send a packet from my computer to the scoreboard telling them the contact that I just made, and then a whole bunch of magical calculations go on, and I get random cards or points as a result of how good or bad that contact was. So I need to get the server name or address, which is at Frequency Frenzy under help, 167.99.20.52. And I need the port, and the port is 22388. Frequencies, I'm not going to change these at all, but if you wanted to say add the, I can insert. If you wanted to say add the 60 meter band, you can do that through here. Or if you wanted to have a frequency in your drop-down list over here for you and your friends to personally meet on FT8 outside of the normal FT8 frequencies, you can do that as well. I don't mess with colors, but you can see that these colors are kind of garish, so you can change them as you see fit. I don't mess with advanced because I'm not doing any UHF microwave JT65 stuff, but if you were, this would be the place to do it. So I'm going to hit OK, which is going to save all of those things. And now that I've hit OK, I'm going to actually start getting decodes in because it now knows what my audio device is. But you can see over here on the left-hand side, there is this green view meter, this green signal strength indicator. And it says 30 dB is recommended when only noise is present. When you're on the FT8 frequency, the majority of the things that are present are FT8 signals, not background noise. So I don't listen to what that says on 30. I try to make this all the green that I can get it. And the way that you do that is by tweaking the RF gain knob on the radio. So I need to go over to the radio while looking at this screen. And you can see that as I was changing it, it went from green to red, and then it went back down to green. And you might have been able, it's still red. And you might have been able to see that it went all the way down to 60 or so when I only had background noise. I'm near a railroad right now, and the train, I'm actually close enough that when the train goes by, I actually get ignition noise from the diesel engines. And I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but I get this tick, 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 tick sound. I might be able to use the noise blanker in my radio to get rid of that, but that's why I'm not getting down to 30 when only noise is present. But the main takeaway here is get it up as high, as much green as you can, no red. Red means that you're actually losing data, you're losing signal, and you'll have trouble with decoding. So now I have a couple of more signals. The 10 meter FT8 band isn't terribly open right now, and that's kind of how 10 meter works. Sometimes it's really booming in good, and sometimes it's absolutely 100% dead. But now we have signals coming in, so I can start to show you what's in this band activity window over here. And this is that blank line between decodes I was telling you about. It gives me this blank line between decodes, and it tells me the band that I'm on. And I find that useful. When I hop bands, it'll tell me as I scroll back up what band I was on way back when that conversation happened, and maybe I need to switch back to that band and try again for some reason. This first column here is UTC time. The second column is dB. This is your signal report in decibels. The computer automatically figures out what your signal report is. You can see a 13 up there is fantastic, and 11 is fantastic. The signal report goes from minus 26 to positive 26. I've seen it higher than positive 26, but that's because somebody's like right next to me in the same park or something along those lines, and it's not terribly typical to get a signal above or below minus 26 and positive 26. Anything in that range is good because you heard it and you saw the signal report, so it worked. The next one over is DT. This is delta time, and you can see how many seconds the person's clock is off. So 0.1, 0.2, I've seen 0.5 come through a couple of times. That's okay. Anything more than 0.5 and you're probably not going to be decoding. So let's go look at what our time is and talk about that for a little bit. If I go back to my web browser, I have a website that I like. It's called time.is, time.is, what the time is. And it tells me my time is exact. So I'm in really good shape. If you come over here and it tells you your time is not exact, then you want to change your computer's clock. And there are tons of methods to do this. The Raspberry Pi 5 doesn't have a built-in clock, but it does have a clock module with a battery backup. So once you set the time, it's set, and then your clock drifts a little bit. So you still want to check it. Or you can set it using internet time if you're connected to the internet. Or since you have a radio with you, you can listen to WWV and figure out what the time is there, and then manually set your clock. You'll be a couple of seconds off. You can kind of tweak it and get a little bit better as you go through the day and get it zeroed in a little bit more. You can kind of pay attention to the network a little bit, and what matters is your seconds. You'd like to give an accurate signal report, but if you're an hour off and your seconds are correct, then you're fine. If you are a day off and your seconds are correct, you're still going to be fine in terms of making contacts. You're just going to give out potentially wrong information, but the recipient is going to have their own clock, and their own clock is going to be synchronized. Worry about the seconds, and the rest of it will kind of take care of itself as the process goes along. All right, so that is the DT setting, the delta time. The next column is the frequency, and I'm running 10 meter FT8, which is 28.074, 28,074 kilohertz, or 28 megahertz. But this doesn't look like 28 megahertz. This is just 4 digits. What's going on here? Let's take a look at the wide graph, and this is the equivalent of the waterfall. What I see here is half of my passband. Your passband is usually 3 kilohertz. The reason why I only see half of the passband is because this bins per pixel 2 setting, I want to see at the very least all of my passband. Sometimes you might need to see a little bit more, so I'm going to turn this up. 3 gets me 2000, 4 gets me 2500, 5 gets me 3000. The waterfall, the past waterfall that's already waterfell doesn't move, so I have to wait for some new signals to come in. But what you'll see is, 0 over here on the left up to, what is this, 3500 over here on the right. And so these 4-digit, 3-digit numbers, 2-digit numbers over here, this frequency column is equivalent to where you see the signal in the waterfall in the passband. So 28.074 starts here at 0, upper sideband, and then it goes all the way to the right to 28.07456 over here on the right-hand side. So this 1500-ish signal, somebody is transmitting there, and if we look, we'll see 1509 is VA6SZ, WP4LBK. Those are the people that are talking at this 1500. And this bright orange here is a very strong signal, and these lighter yellow signals, or even these very faint blue signals, are lighter yet than the strong signals. You can change the color palette if you want. You can pick the default, or you can change it to a completely different color. I'm so used to using the default that I just pick that, but you can pick whatever color you want. All the rest of these settings, you can change the speed that it comes at. You can change where it starts. I've got it starting at 0. Again, experiment, have fun, enjoy your radio, enjoy playing with it. You'll be good to go. But that's some necessary info as to where that frequency is. We'll get into some more necessary info as we keep on going. The message column is what message they are sending. You'll start to see messages pop up over here. I haven't started a communication with anybody, so let me type in a DX call of KT0ADS, and let's hit generate standard messages, and now you can see all of those standard messages. You don't have to do that. If you just double click on somebody, it will automatically generate those messages and start talking, since we have that double click starts transmit option turned on. But here is my call. I'm going to call Decodes from KM9G, and I am in DM96. That is my grid square. And when I hear back from them, I will get their grid square. So the first sequence is going to be me telling them my grid square, and then I'm going to tell them the signal report that I heard, which I haven't heard anything yet, so I have no idea what it will be, and down and so on throughout the chain until you get to the 73, at which point it will prompt you to log. We'll go over all of that as we get farther on. Over here in the RX frequency, sometimes you'll see some stuff over here. This one popped over probably because I just highlighted it. I'm not sure why these guys here popped over. Maybe they are new DX stations or something along those lines. Something to figure out as you're continuing to play with the software. Now that we've got the top and the bottom and the lower left side slider all done, we got to go over a bunch of other things in here while we're in here. The next one up is transmit even first. And if you look at the waterfall, you'll see that there's this every other type scenario going on here, and that is your even or your odd. And the reason why they do that is you have one transmit and one receive. The reason why you have the even and odd is so that you can talk while someone else is listening, or you can listen while someone else is talking. And they are denoted by this timer that goes across the bottom here. And what you want to do is either find somebody you want to talk to over here on the left-hand side, like the K0GD or the PU2KNM call, and double-click on them and start a conversation. That will automatically put you on the even or odd side, the opposite side of what they're on, and it will automatically pick a good place for you to transmit their frequency. But if you are trying to just call CQ to get the party started on your own, look in your waterfall and find a place where there isn't a signal on either side of the conversation. So for example, right here I see that this has a signal on one half and not on the other, and this one has a signal on the other half and a signal on the other as well. So I want to find a place that's clear on both sides, and if you just right click on that spot, it says set RX and TX offset. So that's where I am going to transmit, and now I can do this transmit even first, or I can do odd, and it doesn't matter because both sides of this waterfall, even and odd, are both free. Next to that is hold transmit frequency. This is actually really important. Now that we've gone through all the trouble of getting set up with a nice clear frequency, if I don't have hold transmit frequency, the minute that I respond to somebody, I'll move, and possibly for other reasons I might move. But because I told it to hold there, I'm not going to move, and that's going to be my frequency. So in a typical ham radio QSO, you find what appears to be a clear frequency, you say, is the frequency in use? You get no response, you start calling CQ. That's kind of what we just did in WSJT-X FT8 parlance, however you pronounce that word. And so now I know that this frequency is clear because I can see that it's clear. And so I want to hold transmit frequency. We talked about this part here briefly, this CQ none first or max distance. But what I want to do is, if I'm shooting for the farthest contact, if that's important to me, I'll pick max distance. If I'm shooting for first, I'll pick first. If I want to shout out to a crowded room full of people and not listen to any of their responses, I'll pick none. And there are various reasons why you might want to do that. If I'm still testing my configuration, then I want to call out and I'm not ready to be answered yet. So that might be a reason why you'd pick none. First is the first person that double-clicked on you when you called CQ gets the prize. And then max distance is obviously the person that's the farthest away from you based on your grid square and their grid square gets the prize, the contact with you. I usually leave it at first. That seems to be fair. If I'm in a contest or something where distance matters, I'll change it over to max distance. There are different programs that do FT8 communications that have better settings if you are doing contesting, as an example, where it might be important to do only DX calls and not local calls, or only first, or only farthest, or only closest, or only highest signal reporter, things along those lines. But for me, CQ first is just fine. Over here is the generate messages, and this is fairly automatic. You can change these things. A lot of people will double click on transmit to. That will skip the first conversation, and then they will only reply to people. That shaves 15 seconds off of the total QSO, the total conversation that you have with the remote station. So if you are, again, contesting, or if you're just really in a hurry and want to make as many contacts as possible, shaving 15 seconds off of every over is going to be a good thing for you. So lots of different things going on there, lots of different options to pick. Again, experiment, have fun with it. Same thing with the auto sequence. You can change the report if you think that the automatic report is lying. You can change where you're listening to by typing in a number instead of clicking it. You can change where you are transmitting by typing in a number instead of clicking it. Have all kinds of fun with this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to verify that this is still clear, which it is, and then I'm going to hit transmit 6 to enable CQ, and then I'm going to do enable transmit. And because I'm in the middle of a listening session, it's not my turn to transmit. I'm going to wait. That is the even first or odd second. And now that the clock has switched over, I'm transmitting. And now that we are transmitting, we want to talk about ALC a little bit. On your radio, there is a spot to change your meter over. Hit that button a couple of times until ALC pops up as the thing that you are metering. And then we change the ALC by coming back over here and adjusting the power slider on the far right-hand side of the lower part. And what you want to do is have absolutely no ALC interaction. What ALC is, in a nutshell, is when I am shouting into the radio from the computer, the radio will automatically cut the signal, clip the signal, adjust the signal, whatever it can to make sure that it's not being shouted at, because it's loud. And it doesn't want to hear that. And it doesn't want to transmit it out over the airwaves because you're actually trying to transmit more volume than the signal allows for. In voice, your voice goes up and down depending on how excited and how happy you are. In FT8 data modes, that doesn't happen. The signal is the signal, and you don't want the radio to be interacting with it. I'm getting a contact back from NC2V right now, so I'm responding that I've heard him at a +12. While that's happening, when we go into transmit mode, I'm going to watch the ALC meter, and I'm going to slide that slider. Until I have just no ALC. And since this is a digital mode, cutting the top of your signal off or cutting the bottom of your signal off is going to cut data away and make it harder for you to make a contact. So I have finished a successful contact while I've also set my ALC. It was with NC2V. We've got the start of the QSO, 8:13, the end of the QSO, 8:16. So 1 minute and 15 seconds is usually how long that takes, but it all depends on a couple of different things. Each one of these is a 15-second volley on my side, and then there's a corresponding 15-second volley on their side. So it just depends on band conditions, retries, etc. as to how good you're going to get. The mode is FT8, that's automatically picked. The band is 10 meters, that's automatically picked. I heard him at +12, which is fantastic. He's nice and loud. I'm only using 5 watts, and he heard me at +06, and he is in EL98, which is pretty far away from Oklahoma, where I'm sitting right now. I don't need to put in his name unless I actually happen to know it, but I could, and this will work just like a regular logbook. And then under transmit power, I like to put in what my transmit power was, and I hit retain, so that's 5 watts of transmit power. And by hitting retain, the next contact I make is going to give me another report back, and it's automatically going to have saved that. And then under comments, I like to put down the radio that I'm using because I change radios a lot. IC-703. There's a 703 and a 703 Plus model, so this is where it gets a little weird because I will do plus and then the antenna, and then I will type in the antenna that I'm using, which is the Aries from Coffee and Ham Radios. It is a 9-to-1, and I'm running it in an inverted L configuration up and over my RV at the RV park that I'm at. And again, I'm going to hit retain because I'm going to make a couple of extra contacts. Operator is for that club call I showed you in the settings where you could put that in and have it automatically filled. Exchange sent or received is for some type of contest. Propagation mode, if you happen to know the propagation mode, go for it, hit retain. And if you don't, leave it blank. And all of these settings will come back up. I'm going to make some more contacts. So check that my frequency is clear. You can see somebody moved in to talk to me. I'm going to hit enable TX, and they're now gone off of my frequency. And we should be going into transmit here on the next 15 seconds by. And we're transmitting again. While that's happening, I have another website I want to show you. That is this magical PSK reporter website. This is one of my favorite websites. This is actually the reason why I like FT8. Well, maybe the second reason why I like FT8. We are on the 10 meter band. I want to see signals, or you could pick countries, that were sent and received by, I can pick sent by, so only the ones that I've sent, or received by, only the ones that I've received. I'm going to pick sent and received by. The call sign, you can do country of call sign, grid square, or anyone. I'm going to do the call sign, but choosing country of call sign or choosing grid square tells you if the band is open to that country or that grid square. And I put in KM9G, and then you can leave it at all modes, but I always pick FT8. I haven't done any other modes in the last 12 hours than FT8, so it wouldn't matter. And then before I hit the go button, I'm going to hit display options, and there's a couple of options in here that I like to choose. I'm going to hide faint monitors. I don't want people who can barely hear me to show up on my map. I only want people that can actually hear me with a signal report that actually makes sense to me. And again, I don't want to see a monitor if there's no reports. That's why you see all of these things here, all of these bubbles. These are all different people that haven't heard me because I didn't tell it who I was, and they don't have any report on me, and it's just clutter on the map. It's also on a whole bunch of different bands besides the band that I'm on, so I also don't want to see that. Hide pink blob. I don't know if I have a pink blob yet or not, but I really like the pink blob. It's kind of a field strength meter, if you will. We'll talk about that if it pops up. Hide the night shadow, hide, all this other stuff. I want to see the SNR, signal report, signal to noise ratio. The connecting lines, you might enjoy seeing those. You might want to turn those off. I like seeing the scene times. It tells me if my signal's working on different overs or not. I don't like the auto pan zoom feature, so I turn that off. I click it to turn on no auto pan zoom. So you have to kind of think through the positive, negative ramifications, the truth table, if you will. I like the Mercator projection. All the rest of this stuff is fine, so I'm going to hit the X button to save that, and then I'm going to hit go to see the changes. And this is going to show me my contacts on 10 meters. And then I will zoom in on the map, and I am doing really well. Holy moly. You can see that pink blob that I was telling you about. It shows up that I am in Oklahoma, which is true. I am. The source bubble has a couple of extra darts coming off of the side of it, but you can see I'm making contacts over to the East Coast, not really much over to the West Coast. I am down into South America. I'm into an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the Azores. KCU2GI is the call sign over there. That is 6,515 kilometers away at 5 watts. I was heard at minus 20. That is pretty amazing. Let's see if this one down here at minus 16, which is a better signal report, is farther away. Yeah, it is. 8,987 miles away. So almost 3,000 kilometers. Almost 3,000 kilometers farther away with a stronger signal report. So that's some of the amazing things about how FT8 works. Let's zoom in here and talk about this pink blob for a second. The pink blob is the website's approximation of where your signal is going. This website doesn't know a whole lot about what's going on other than what is actually being reported to it by other hams all over the planet. So my signal may be doing equally well to the west, but no one has reported it, so it doesn't know. And what it's saying is the average of your signal strength is in this direction. And a lot of that has to do with not many people being on ham radio on the west coast, even fewer of them being on 10 meters on the west coast, and not many people on the east coast being on 10 meter FT8 either. So if I switched bands and switched to, say, 20 meters, which is usually pretty busy, then there will be a lot more signal reports over here. I still hear my radio clicking in the background, so I don't think anybody's answered me, or I might be stuck in a conversation with somebody. So I want to take a look. Yeah, I'm calling CQ and nobody's answering. I have 1 minute left down here on my watchdog timer in the bottom corner. So after another couple of tries, it's actually going to stop transmitting because, contrary to popular belief, FT8 is not fully automatic and no operator skills involved whatsoever. If you think it's no skills, come join our FT8 poker match and see how you get your cards dealt to you from the no skills approach versus the skilled approach. Now that we have our configuration all done, I want to name my configuration because I like to change radios. So I'm going to hit clone from the default. And now I have default copy, and I'm going to rename my default copy to IC-703. And that's going to give me a name up here. So when I switch to the Icom 703, I can pick it off the list by hitting that and choosing switch to. It's going to close the software and reopen it to activate that configuration. And so what you can do, what I have done on other machines, and this is a fresh machine to show you the deal, is you can pick Icom 705, Icom 7300, Icom 7100, whatever Icom radios you have, and they'll be right there ready for your reconfig. Or if you take or if you're using a laptop and you take it out portable, or you take your Raspberry Pi portable, then there's another good, quick, easy way to switch between radios is by cloning that configuration. One of the things that you're going to have to be aware of when you are doing FT8 on a radio is heat. FT8 is a full duty cycle. Most Icom radios are full duty cycle radios, and they are designed to run at 100% of their transmit power for pretty much all day long. This is not my radio. This was loaned to me by a friend of mine, James. Thank you very much. As I'm making this video, I am only running this at 5 watts of transmit power. This radio is capable of doing 10 watts. If I was going to have this be my personal primary radio and I wanted to use 10 watts on FT8, I would check the temperature of the radio. I'd use a pyrometer, or I'd use my hand, or whatever the case may be. I'd run it at 5 watts for a while, get those finals nice and hot inside the radio, and put my hand on it and go, that feels like 5 watts. Then I would run it at 10 watts for a couple of QSOs, and I would see, is it about the same? Is it shockingly hotter? What does my thermometer, my pyrometer show? Those kinds of things. A lot of your modern cheap multimeters have a built-in temperature probe that will tell you what the temperature is when you touch different parts of the radio. Go as deep as you want, but the idea here is to have some mechanical empathy and not burn up your radio, not burn up your investment in your enjoyment of the hobby. You will make contacts, plenty of contacts all day long at 5 watts, so not really much call to go above 5 if you don't want to, but if you do, you've been warned, don't burn out your finals. And hopefully I gave you a little bit of information on how to make sure that doesn't happen to you. We got it all taken care of. We got the Digirig connected to the radio. We got the radio connected to the computer. We got the computer connected to FT8. And that is where all the magic happens. The FT8 setup is fairly straightforward. After you do this a couple of times, it'll make perfect sense to you. You want wide bandwidth. You want no filtering, no interference whatsoever. You want no interference from your ALC, which is set on the computer. You want to have your RF gain set properly. And then you want to make contacts and have fun, and that's where the rest of the learning begins. Hopefully this overview has helped you out. If you do like it, please subscribe for more content like this, where I do more how-tos and also reviews. Once you get done with all of that stuff, there is a video right over here I think you will enjoy next. Thanks for being awesome. I'll see you over there.